One thing that I learned that was really struck me, one of the golden nuggets that I learned from my professors was that we have a tendency to blame our parents for their parents' screw up. So I'll say that again. We have a tendency to blame our parents for their parents' screwed up. Is exactly what Felix talks about, right? So your parents had great intentions, right? What's great about the intentions, the value of hard work, determination, grit, resilience, being a leader, being servant, helping people, those are all phenomenal. But I think where they could be even better would be understand the intention, but take a different method of raising our kids. Because when we use a form of punishment, as we already covered, that really breaks the resilience part. That's actually the opposite of cultivating resilience and grit, right? And especially when you tie into shame. And when our kids start to get this narrative, start shaming them, you're lazy, well, you could be better, you're wasting your life, all these shaming words that we say, they start forming that behavior becomes identity. I
Yeah.
hope that ties into what Felix has been talking about.
The one thing that we can do as parents is that we tie it to the behavior, not to the person, right? What you just did there was this. What you just did there looked like this to me, right? Instead of saying you or you're always like this, right? Last year at GYLS, I worked with a young man whose parents were divorced, right? And every time his mother thinking about the ex-husband, she would break down, start crying. He became the person that was more like he didn't know what to do, so he's just trying to console her, right? He hasn't, and then so when he went to spend time with his dad was always harsh, always trying to get like the intent was that he wants to make him better, right? And so he came to me and he says, I don't know what to do. I'm caught in this place where this is just he was breaking down. And so kids don't understand the intent. You cannot think that they do. They don't understand. And they think that we parents know what we're doing. And most of the time we don't, right? And so there's a couple ways to combat this. And that is number one is that we need to let them know that they're loved and they're enough. And you can't, and in my family, when I was young, I don't remember love being talked about at all, right? And maybe I'm wrong. I just don't remember it being talked about.
You're not the only one.
Right. Yeah. And fortunately, being part of the Tony community now, it's a word that I always give because people are seeking it. It's the most important thing in the end that people are looking for. But we have to give it in the way they can take it, right? If we say it in the way that we say we want it, or show it in the way we want it, then it may not hit right. If we tell them they're enough, and that's not the way that they are wanting to hear it, maybe they want more of a hug or maybe they want something else, it's not going to have the impact we want. So you may be saying I love you to your kids and it's not hitting them at all, right? And so we have to ask them, do you feel like you're loved? In fact, parents, if you're listening to this right now, go to your kids and ask these two questions. Do you feel like you're loved? And the second is, do you feel like you're enough? In my eyes, from Felix's perspective, do you feel like do I think you are enough, right? And what you may get back may surprise you. And then the follow-up, so the questions are obviously extremely important. So the follow-up question is, okay, so what would have to happen for you to know that you're enough for me? If you can answer these questions, if you can get these, they're tough questions, right? They're not easy to ask from a personal perspective because it opens us up to failure. Maybe we're going to have failed massively as parents along this way, right? And you know what? You have to make failure okay. Just like with everywhere else in life, failure has to be okay as long as we learn something from it. Because if we keep going down this path, it's just going to get worse and worse.
It's interesting you say that because we're trying to instill confidence and strong mindset and resilience in our kids. But if we are not resilient and have strong mindset to begin with, how our kids is going to learn? Because going back to what you're saying, our kids sees us as superheroes, so they're going to model off us. So if we don't learn, if we don't take the time, if we resist and just hide the behavior and just don't talk about it, how are they going to pick up?
And a lot of parents think confidence means that they don't show any vulnerability. And one of the biggest reasons why GLS works so well is that on the first day we have Kathy Buckley, who is the most vulnerable person you'll ever meet in your life. She's the most loving person, the most vulnerable person. She talks about everything that's happened in her life. She talks about the abuse that she's had, like sexual abuse that's happened to her, even from her own father, and how she was able to forgive them and then take care of them in their old age, right? Unbelievable example of vulnerability from an adult that they probably have never seen in their life, right? And because we think that being vulnerable is a weakness, and that shows them that we're just human, right? And that also shows them that, but here's the other side. You can't, just like this young man's mother who just broke down and cried, you cannot do it without the resiliency comes from solving it, showing them that you can solve it. And that's the key, right? So with his mom, she's just in this locked in pattern of whatever grief she's going through, whatever pain she's going through, and there's nothing he can do about it, right? She doesn't explain it, but she doesn't know how to explain it. And so she just continues to do it. So what worked with him, and we just had to talk about first and 10, having him understand, so why are his parents doing this behavior? But that one of the great things Kathy taught me, you take the labels off, right? So when working with, like, so imagine they're not your mom and dad. Imagine they're just two human beings on this earth for a certain amount of time, right? And they had a child, and they are just doing their best. So what do you think the actual intent is? If they want you to be your best, what do you think the intent was behind these behaviors, right? And he actually had a moment of just like clarity, and you just started thinking about it. It's like, wow. So when people, like, they're in pain, or your dad's doing this to you, what does he really want? Oh, well, he really wants me to be better, so he's trying to be tough on me, right? And one thing is to be told that, right, to somebody. The other thing is for them to discover it in their own head that, oh, I see it now, right? I see this is happening, and my mom doesn't know how to handle this. And so she's just there suffering. She's just in pain, she's suffering. And it's like, so what are things that you can do to help them? So if you're not locked into that pattern, because that's what he was reacting to, what can you do to actually help your mom and help your dad? And so he started listing off all these things, like, okay, so I could do this, I could do this. And I go, okay, what kind of person do you need to be to make sure that this happens, right? And so he started realizing that he recognized his own identity, right? So the powerful process of just building his identity back up so that it was not his fault. His parents are not perfect. They're wounded children right now. This is like, just like you said, his dad had that passed down to him from his dad or mom, or both, right? They're punishing, or they're hard on him so that he can get better. And some people listening to this right now think that what I'm saying right now is complete BS. We need to be hard on our kids, right? You have no idea what's on the other side because you're locked into this pattern. That if we actually gave people all kinds of love, what would they be able to do then, right? Instead of, oh, I need to be hard. So there's a great study. It's from, I think, 2013. It's in the Harvard Business Review. You can actually look it up. So they went and studied across all these different industries on what were the highest performing teams. And they wrote, so when we found these high performing teams, what was the commonality? They found out there's a ratio, 5.8 to 1. It's a 5.8 to 1 ratio of great comments to critical comments is the biggest factor in these teams being brilliant together, right? So when I go and work with companies, I go, all the human psychology work, communication work, leadership work that we do, the one thing we say, look, if you want instant results, change your communication with everyone around you to 5.8 to 1. And it's I used to say it was 3 to 1. I had a thought in my mind it was 3 to 1, but now that I read the studies, like 5 to 8.8 to 1. And some people, as soon as I say that, they'll be like, oh, that's complete. There's no way I can do that, right? That just shows you already you're like a limiting belief in your head. So they found that the average teams are 2 to 1, 2 great comments to everyone critical. The poorest performing teams are 1 to 3. So the first question is not how you're treating your kid. The first question is, how are you treating yourself, right? What is going on in your mind? And we're not talking about 5.8 BS comments to people. We're talking about catching them doing something right and letting them know and making that a consistent thing and doing it from the heart that you really mean it. It doesn't matter. Everyone sniffs out things like compliments that aren't real, right? So they have to be real. And when the leader starts doing it first for themselves in their own head, you're not saying, oh, you did great when you didn't do great. That's fine. You just say, oh, here are the things I did do great, and list them all off. And here's the things I can improve. So list those off, right? So that's the first thing. 5.8 to 1. If you can create that in your home, you will see unbelievable change. Simple as that. And the second thing is that, a standpoint of just, you have to overcome it in your own head, right? So you got to do it to yourself first even before you do it with your kids. But you'll find out when you start doing it yourself, it's just natural. We're the harshest critics on ourselves, right?
I love that. So going back to 5.8 to 1. And
Yeah.
second is overcome your own head. And as you're talking about this, I had a pivotal moment last year when I was at this first time I was serving at the Global Food Leadership Summit, GYLS. There was a game that these kids play called Geocache or Scavenger Hunt, where they work together as a team. And I believe the team is around 50 kids or so, give or take, 20, 25, 50 kids.
Usually about 20 to 25, right?
20, 25, sorry. So they would go around different checkpoints and trying to find the scavenger hunt and locate it on their phone, things like that. And I remember specifically a halfway mark where we sat down and debrief. And the question was, what's going well, right? The 5.8 to 1, we started with that process. What's going well? And this little girl raised up her hand and she started talking, but then she started talking about what's wrong with everybody. And here's the crazy part, right? Because they're like, what? I forget, 14 teams, something like that. And stack ranking, we were the number one team of everybody. Right. We were the number one team. Now, for dead last, I can think about that, but we're number one. And here's a little girl like, you over there, you two, you guys not paying attention. You guys are goofing off. You over there, you're not checking your phone. I'm doing all the work, and just went down this rabbit hole of criticism.
Right.
And what's really interesting was you can already tell our morale was really high because, we saw the stack ranking, we're number one. The moment she said that, you can see the deflation. It went out of the cell. All their heads went like this, right? And you guys, I know it sounds kind of BS, but what Felix says is, guys, 5.8 to 1. This is so important. You lead with criticism and not discussion, especially in a team and a family and parenting. You're deflating, you're taking all the wind out of the sail. This is why our mentor, Tony, says success only builds on top of success. Success does not build on top of failure. So if you want to raise a strong and resilient and confident kid, do the 5.8 to 1. Oh my God, that's like the golden nugget. This is, if you guys didn't take anything out of this interview, this would be it, right?
Yeah, start recognizing, and just like you said, start with, and in our process in the leadership body for Tony, we have been drilled into our heads to start with what's great, right? Always start with what's great. And it's funny because Tony has his methodology of when people start with criticism first, he'll hose them down with a water gun and stuff. But that's the process. Is like, we have to stop being critical first. If you want your thoughts to be heard by somebody else, well, two things. One is that always you, as a parent, you need to learn what I would call I call it Inception after the movie, right? Alan, have you watched that movie before? So it's a Christopher Nolan movie. Christopher Nolan's known for making some really wild movies, and they're really well structured. And so Inception is all about what's the most powerful force in somebody's brain. We know that's identity, right? How does identity get created? It gets created from our own thoughts, right? And it's what meaning we make of it. So in this movie, you could go into somebody's dreams. They had a technology, you could go into somebody's head while they were asleep, go into their dream, and you could find the safe, right? The place that they create Inception on their own. And if you could unlock the safe and put a little idea in there, then like they would wake up in the morning, open it, realize it's their own idea, and then that's when people go crazy. So when people ask, like, why aren't you motivated? Why? Because it was never their own idea. And that's one thing. So in this movie, though, if you, like, because of the drama, if you die in somebody's brain, they're always defending, right? So there's always defenders trying to kill you. And if they kill you when you're in the dream state, then you'll die in real life, right? But it doesn't have to be that dramatic. All we have to do, the most important tool we have, and the tool that we use the least, is asking questions. And the quality questions that if you learn to be a mess, so the reason I keep going back to Tony after all 27 years now, right, is because I listen to the questions he asks. And I want them for my own, right? I want them in my tool belt. He asks some of the most astonishing, awesome questions that you will ever see, especially during the intervention process. Because he's just coming from a place of he's looking to serve, and he's a vessel at that point, and whatever comes out of his mouth, he goes, it's divinely created, right? So he believes that he's being guided to ask certain questions. So are we demanding or are we asking questions? Maybe that's another area of parents. Like, how often are you stating versus asking questions? What percentage of the time? Take a look at your own behavior, right? Again, it starts with us. We have to be better. If I'm just pointing at my kids and just yelling at them or saying this, saying that, how often am I asking a question that could actually benefit them?